This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex, and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Welcome, George. Thanks for being here yet again.
Good morning, Dr. Marlene. Always great to be with you. At least good morning in our time zone.
That's right. That's right. You know, I've got this former client in England who tells me that it's, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 in the evening there, but it's evening there. So I always have to cover all the time zones. Anyway, we are going to, I know last week we said we were going to wrap up co-parenting rules, and we did, but I am going to do a last takeaway that I thought would be a nice segue into some other stuff that we're going to talk about today. I like to keep people guessing a little bit too. You never know what you're going to hear when you log on here. But I would say, and George, you can say what you think, either agree with me, disagree with me, come up with something of your own. But I would say the takeaway for the rules of co-parenting, besides, now I'm going to give you 3, besides not communicating through the children, and not involving children in adult issues, the overall takeaway is there's not a lot you can control on the other parent's time. That to me would be the overarching takeaway of rules of co-parents. What do you think? Or do you think one of those other two is more the takeaway message, or do you have another one yet?
I do have another message, and that has to do with this issue of contempt citations. So I would add on there as an addendum or a PS, give serious thought to alternatives to a contempt citation before pursuing one. And those alternatives, of course, a readily available one is the parent coordinator decision maker. That's usually a much more constructive alternative to a contempt citation, and probably cheaper.
Yes, yes. And I have to say that it is. And I'll tell you why. I am less per hour than any attorney I know. And there's one of me, whereas if you have attorneys, you each have an attorney. So you're paying twice what you're paying when you pay one person, plus the fact that I'm usually about half per hour what they are. So anyway, I'm just using myself as an example of your point that it's going to be cheaper to have a parenting coordinator. And what I love about that, and this was not going to be our topic today, but while we're on it, what I love about being a parenting coordinator, or PC as we call them, is we get to actually work with the parents. I was on a call yesterday with 2 co-parents, and we were going over stuff like not communicating through the children. And this mom had, unbeknownst to her, not knowing that was a rule, communicated through the 16-year-old daughter. Well, it created some issues because then the daughter goes back to dad and says, what is this about we're spending this weekend with mom? Well, that was actually not the plan. But then the daughter sees the shock on dad's face when he says, what? And so it just creates a lot of anxiety and tension. And so once I told them yesterday, hey, one of the rules, in fact, I call it the golden rule of co-parenting, is we don't communicate through the children. Mom acknowledged it. And that's another thing. I'm going to take a side note here, a detour. But parents out there, if you will acknowledge your mistakes or your lack of awareness, it's not even a mistake. You didn't know. Like she didn't know. I'm not going to hold something against someone who doesn't know. And so you've got to educate yourself, though, and learn the rules. And once she knew that, she was like, okay, no problem. I understand how that caused some trouble here. And
Mhm.
so I like being able to, that was a long way of saying, I like being able to actively work with co parents to teach them the things they don't know. Nobody teaches people this because nobody wants to think about divorce.
Well, and on your observation about economics, that it's cheaper to me when I think in terms of cost, I think of three dimensions, and that's time, money, and emotion. And I think it's cheaper on all three levels.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you think of it that way and that you mentioned that because the toll emotionally is what I see the most. You know, that's the greatest toll is emotionally. Because parents get worked up and they're upset, and I understand that. But it's very calming to have someone say, "Hey, we have a simple rule for that." You know, and explain what it is. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, I can live with that. And I have very little pushback on the rules of co parenting, very little. There's not a lot that people disagree with me about, or they might until I explain the reason. You know, people have to understand the reason and know the reason. But usually, once I provide it, they're good to go. And I'm sure you see the same with clients you work with that once they know, they're okay.
I wish it were that simple, but
Okay, your world's not as simple as mine. I'll give you that.
let me say sometimes they're okay.
Right, right. No, yeah, that's true. Because not all of my parents are either. And I have parents who say, I don't agree with that. And you know, sometimes I say, I hear you. I really don't agree either, but it's the rule. And I always tell them, don't shoot the messenger. I don't make these rules, but I know what they are and we have to follow them. And I don't agree with all of them. I don't, but they are what they are and we have to follow them.
Well, and I would speculate that if it's presented as a means to secure the emotional health of their children, that they would be more accepting of them.
Yes, yes, yes. Once we can explain to people the harm, the emotional harm to their children, um, communicating through them, for example, makes them anxious. They don't want to be a messenger for you to the other parent who may not receive the message too well.
Well, and we don't know whether the child is an accurate reporter of what was told to him or her.
Yeah,
They may garble the message or get some details confused, and off we go.
right, right. And I've had that happen a lot. In fact, I told somebody 2 days ago, a 4 year old, because she had passed a message through a 4 year old, is not a reliable reporter of information or deliverer of information. And that is really true. And it's true for 6 and 8 and 10 and even 12 year olds too. They don't get the details right. So we should not send messages through them, period.
Well, and most of us who have had any type of communications class or part of communications in a class, we're familiar with the example of you line up uh, eight people and you tell something to the first one, and then they tell it to the second, the third, and by the time they get to the eighth, compare what they're saying with what the first person was told, and it's not necessarily the same.
No, I love that activity because it's never the same. It might be off just a little bit. It is never the same.
No, and it's a real good example of selective perception, selective retention.
Mhm, mhm. And selective articulation when you go to spew it back out.
Right, right. And so to put the child in that role is unfair. And I think that's probably true of most any age. They have to be, in my view, they have to be quite a bit older before violating that rule. Maybe
Right.
16, 17, then there might be some exceptions, rather, let me say exceptions rather than violations. But until then, they're pretty good rules to live by.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, because the parents I was talking to yesterday, the daughter's 16 and she got anxious about it and didn't deliver the message quite right. And so dad is like, "What? No." And it was inaccurate, but that's because mom gave it to her inaccurately. And so all the more reason we just don't do it through the kids, because now they're going to be in the middle of our anxiety, angst, frustration, annoyance, whatever it is we may feel.
Well, and I have to say this. I people in my experience, I haven't seen clients litigate their way to a healthy co-parenting relationship.
Amen. Amen. Nobody ever litigated their way to a healthy co parenting relationship. That's right. That's right. Well, and to that point, I'll share this. You know how I love to talk about my current cases on here because it's real life stuff. It's real life stuff. I've
Mhm.
had people say, I've listened to your show, I've listened to you, whatever. And those are great examples, but put it into practical terms. Okay, here's some practical application. I had two parents in my office last night, and they have changed the parenting time significantly. So that, of course, alters the child support amount. Well, they never changed it. And dad, who is the one paying mom, is not real keen on doubling pretty much what he was paying her. But mom cannot afford to have her as much as she has her now and pay for everything. So, what we agreed to do is we're having someone run the numbers. It's a child's legal representative, run the numbers on the child support calculation. And then once she tells me what, per that formula, the amount would be, we're going to negotiate. And I'm certain mom's going to not expect as much as it should be. And dad will agree to something because he's going to be happy that it will be less than what it should be. But that's the way you resolve an issue.
Well, what comes to mind when I hear that is nobody, I often would say nobody gives a standing ovation to a compromise.
Right, right. That's right. That is right. But it's the best way to resolve it. And they both agreed when I said this is better than going to court. They both nodded in agreement. And, you know, so they know it.
Yeah,
Um,
court is rarely a pleasant experience for uh, the parties.
right. And as you said, parents never litigate their way to a healthy co parenting relationship.
I think that's true. The resentment just foments and grows, and people act out in one way. If they can't act out that way, they'll try another way. So it's really, if it can be handled on the mental health side, it's so much more constructive to the situation.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Okay. This is a good segue into the next thing I want to talk about. And that is, while we don't communicate through the children, I have another kind of takeoff on that has occurred recently and has occurred over the years many times, but it just came up again recently. In fact, I wrote an email response this morning to this stepmom, and I don't mind that a step parent reached out. In fact, I thanked her. You probably are letting me know about this when the parent didn't really want to, but it's important that I know. But what the issue is, and we've talked before about kids going to the wrong parent. They go to each parent to talk about the other instead of going to that parent. And so one of the things I really work with kids on is going to the correct parent. Well, these are younger children, and I believe the older knows, but the younger one, who's 7, I think, she really didn't understand. No, don't talk to dad and stepmom about mom. Come to me and then we'll talk to mom. But stepmom reaches out and said, the kids, or one of the kids, has told me this stuff. Don't you think we need to address it? Can we bring the kids in? Yes, we need to address it. Yes, you can bring the kids in. But how about I talk to the kids first alone, and then I talk with them with mom. She's the one they have an issue with. And this is akin to not communicating through the children. This child is kind of a reverse of that, communicating with a parent, in this case, a step parent, about the other parent. And what that step parent needs to do, I mean, at least she brought it to my attention, but what a parent or step parent, either one, needs to do is somehow get this directed back toward the parent that you have a problem with. Because in this case, dad can't do anything about what's happening at mom's house. So we have to address it with mom. So I'm going to stop there and let you comment on that. I know you don't have to deal with this stuff a lot, but you see the fallout of it when the other parent has talked to the kids about your client and messed everything all up.
Typically, the context in which I would hear about it would be one of the parents is frustrated because they can't control what's going on at the other parent's home. And
Yes.
that's when it comes to me, when that frustration boils over, and it really requires some re-education to help the person to let go of that drive to control what's going on at the other parent's home, because they're just not going to be able to do it.
No, no. And I'm smiling because that takes us right back to what I said at the top of the show is the overarching message, the takeaway message is you can't control much of what happens in the other parent's home. And in
Absolutely.
this case, yes, yes. In this case, the children claim, I'm not sure that it's really happening, but they claim when they talk about not only dad, but in particular stepmom, that mom gets upset. Well, that might be true. It might not be true. What do you consider upset? You know, and I
Mhm.
don't know to what extent. I mean, as you and I both know, often, and parents out there who don't know this, often your kids are exaggerating. They say, Mom gets upset. Well, what upset might be is just, we don't need to be talking about this, or, whatever it may be. It may be a totally different message or feeling that she's having than being quote unquote upset. But
Mhm.
kids will report it that way.
Sure, and I guess what it sounds like to me, that's what's relevant is the child's perception.
Right, right. It is. And not only that, but they have a very vested interest in presenting it that way, which we will talk about when we come back. It's time to take a quick break, but we'll leave you hanging and address it when we come back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Before we went to break, we were talking about, and I love that we left people hanging, because hopefully you all held on there, and we'll wait to hear what we have to say. But there is a vested interest children have in talking to one parent about the other, especially complaining about one to the other. And George, do you know what that is? I know you do, but I'm going to let you share it.
What's the number one thing they complain about the other?
No. What's the vested interest children have? What do they get out of complaining to one parent about the other?
Control, I guess.
Well, attention.
Attention.
Sorry,
Control.
that was unfair of me to put you on the spot like that. But
That's all right.
yes,
I made a good guess.
that's right. Well, it's all about control. It truly is. Like, parents want to control what's happening in the other home. And in this case, to your point, stepmom's complaining to me that the kids are complaining that mom's talking badly about her. Well, then stepmom's got a vested interest herself in bringing that to me because she's hurt that mom is talking about her. And like I said, you have to take what these kids tell you. Like I said, this little girl's 7. She's not a reliable reporter of information like we were talking about earlier. So you have to take that into consideration. But no, kids get attention for saying negative things about the other parent to one parent, because co-parents are all too willing to listen to complaints about the other parent, never once thinking if they're doing that to that parent, they're probably doing it to you with the other parent. And so let's put a stop to it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That really is the backside of the golden rule. Treat the other one like you would like to be treated. And so that's apparently not going on, and nipping it in the bud as far as that communication situation would be desirable, I would imagine, by all concerned, by all the adults concerned.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, do not think for a minute that they aren't doing the same to you, because it will get them attention in the other household, regardless of which household that is. And some parents respond or react to that to a greater degree than others. But just handle it the way you would want it handled and direct them back to that parent. There's nothing wrong with saying, I can't do anything about what happens in your other parent's household, but why don't we talk with them about it? Or why don't you talk with them about it? Or my famous story I tell, I put my son on the phone with his dad. Now, he was old enough, and I think he was 9 or 10, and I have a good relationship with his dad. But he complained for like the 15th time about something about his dad. And finally, I said, let's talk to him. And he's like, no, I can't do that. He'll get mad. And I said, I don't think he will. And then, George, I know you know this story, but for our audience out there that may not, magic words came to me. I did not anticipate this, but with divine intervention, magic words came to me that when I got his dad on the phone, along with my son, I said, our son has something he wants to tell you. Now, I have assured him you're not going to get mad. And that made it so he really couldn't. After you say something like that, what is that other parent going to say? And in his case, he said, no, of course I'm not going to get mad. What's up, bud? And I hung up and let them talk. And 10 minutes later, my son came out and said, wow, he didn't get mad at all. Well, those magic words might have helped. But the truth is, we teach our children not to gossip. We teach them to go to the correct parent. And here's my take. If there truly is a problem, they'll be willing to do that. Not always, not easily. But if there really is a problem, you'll know it. If they're just gossiping, you'll know it.
Well, and I think that's a great way to head off problems with a step parent.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And it gets even more complicated when it is a step parent, because now you have to gauge, should they even be involved? Should they be contacting me? I allow it. Some of my colleagues don't. But there's certain step parents, I know you're going to agree with this, and we're going to get a good laugh about this. There's some step parents I would rather deal with than the parent.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's sometimes that's why I say there's an art to being a good step parent.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is being a calming effect on the biological parent.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Calm your spouse down, and they often do. And that's a good segue to something else that I'd like for us to address. And that is the role of step parents and grandparents. Because I've said for years, and I mean this wholeheartedly, step parents and grandparents can be my greatest asset on the case. They can keep things calm. They can calm that other parent down. They can give things a different perspective. They can be another ear for the children. But they can also be my greatest problem. And they just stir up the conflict and stir up the problems and make things 1,000 times worse. And I know you've seen that too.
Well, I've had the recent opportunity to observe a family where there was a divorce, and the divorcing parent was the mom. She's in probably her early 30s, and there are children involved. And I've been able to watch her parents interact with her through the divorce, and I have talked to them separately, not a great deal, but they resent her soon-to-be former husband, but they've been real good about controlling not saying so to their daughter who's going through the divorce. And it's been a positive experience for me to watch them be supportive of her without venting their own resentment toward her soon-to-be ex.
Yes,
So
it doesn't serve
it's,
anyone. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, in that case, I think the grandparents are a great asset to the parent who's going through the divorce. So they can be a great asset as well as a great nuisance.
Right. But I mean, that's a beautiful story because no one's going to be served well or nothing good is going to come out of anyone bashing that other parent. And
Right.
yet, a lot of times, that's what friends and neighbors and family members and coworkers think you want to hear. They think you want to hear, oh, what a lousy person that ex of
Mhm.
yours is. Well, that doesn't help anyone, even if they are. That doesn't help anyone. And so, God bless those grandparents that support their daughter without bashing their soon to be ex son in law.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been uh, a positive experience for me to be able to observe it. And I've been able to observe
Mhm.
it up close. There are other relationships involved here, but it's been good. And in fact, the daughter you spoke to on one occasion,
Oh, okay. I know who
and
you're talking about. Yes.
that's who I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
so it's been a positive experience to see that unfold in the family dynamic.
Good, good. Well, and to that point, if I have the opportunity to interact with grandparents and people like that, significant others, or even friends of a parent going through a divorce, I take that opportunity to interact with them. I have clients sign a release that says there's no confidentiality in this case. And I mean, they can have certain things confidential and other things not. It's not just a blanket, there's no confidentiality. But I will usually seek their permission to talk to anyone who they bring into my path. You know,
Mm.
if you're going to bring this person to my office, that's great, but I'm probably going to take the opportunity to speak with them and I let them know how to best support this person because people mean well. And like I said, they think they're telling you what they want, what you want to hear in supporting you, but it can actually perpetuate the conflict and the ill will and the negative feelings that each parent is feeling about the other instead of moving past it. We've got to move beyond it. And they often just have trouble doing that because they think they're being a good friend or a good family member. And it's like, you're really not.
Well, and we have to be careful with that about speaking with third-party witnesses. We have to make it clear that there's no attorney-client privilege there.
Hmm.
Uh, that's very important. And so we just have to be very careful about making that clear to both our client and the person we're speaking with.
Yes. Yes. That's for sure. And that's a good point to make. Um, I have seen some grandparents and step parents who are worse than the parent. The parent is like doing okay with the other parent. And then you've got grandparents or especially step parents who are jealous of that other person or whatever. And they seem to create or perpetuate conflict. And it's just not good. It's not healthy for the kids.
No, and unfortunately, friends often tend to inflame the anger and make that friend of theirs who's going through the divorce feel perfectly justified and that much more resolute in their position, and take away flexibility. So friends also can be a good asset or a liability for the person going through a divorce. And so
Mhm.
the person going through the divorce needs to be careful about who they're listening to, what their motives are. They're trying to
Mhm.
be supportive and so forth, but that's not always the best way to go.
No, and along that line, what drives me crazy are these groups on social media platforms, Facebook and stuff like that. These groups of disgruntled moms or disgruntled dads, and they find support in these groups, but they're toxic. Some of them are toxic. I don't know if you've looked at them, George, but I've seen a few, and whew, it
I
can't be a good
actually,
place.
I have not. I'm not familiar with any of those sites, and I probably don't intend to be.
No, no, it's good that you aren't familiar because they truly are. The only way I know how to describe them is toxic.
Mhm.
And so if you're a parent out there wanting to join a support group, make sure you find a healthy support group. I'm sure there's plenty of healthy ones out there, but boy, are there a lot of unhealthy and toxic support groups.
Yeah, I think some of the divorce recovery workshops that are sponsored by some churches and so
Hmm.
forth have
Hmm.
very positive programs, and kind of avoid the negatives or point out the negatives to be avoided. And some of those are pretty good programs.
Yes, if it's through a church or an organization having to do with parents or divorce or whatever, those are usually pretty safe.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one that I was familiar with in Colorado Springs that I used to refer people to fairly regularly, and the feedback I got was positive from that people who attended it.
And I know which one you're talking about. And I don't know if they're still around or not. It was a large church, or is a
Yeah.
large church downtown. Yes, yes. And I think they're still around. I don't know. But I believe so. I should probably find out. It'd probably be a good resource for me. But you know what I do on my end is I just sit them down in my office and we have a good long talk.
Well, and that one-on-one is probably worth as much or more than being in a class in a group setting. So nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, I like to do the level 2 co-parenting class that way. And I think this is a useful point for divorcing parents to hear that if they offer like a level 2 co-parenting class on a one-on-one basis, take them up on it because I know my people get direct, specific to their situation. I don't want to say advice because I try not to give advice, but information. We focus on their situation. We apply what I'm teaching them to their circumstances. And I
Mhm.
think that's invaluable.
Yeah, I would think it would be.
Yeah.
I would think it would be.
Yeah. Because people always want to know, how does this apply to me? And some things don't. And so again, we can tailor it toward that parent, toward their situation, their co-parenting relationship, the ages of their children. I could go on, all the variables. And so it might be worth your time and money to sit down with somebody one on one and take the class.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And prevention is better than cure.
Yes, yes, for sure. What is that saying? A ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes, that's
That's so true. All right, it is time to take another quick break, but we'll be back and wrap this up. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. Yeah, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Man, there's a lot that goes into this co-parenting, you know?
There really is. And again,
There
I'm,
is.
I'm not saying that there's never a circumstance where a contempt citation is appropriate. I'm just saying it needs to be a last resort, and used judiciously as a remedy.
Yeah. Yes. And I am glad you made that clarification, because we don't want to shame people who should be filing contempt. You know, because
Right.
I see some of that too. I see people who are too kind, and I appreciate that, but I don't think they do themselves or their children any good. I think they do them a disservice when they should be filing contempt and they don't, or should be taking some kind of action and they don't.
Yeah, that's true. And so I think it's important to clarify that for the audience, that we're certainly not saying that under no circumstances should that be pursued. That's certainly not the case. There are cases where it's appropriate and necessary. And in some cases, it's a harsh way to establish boundaries between the parents.
Yes, yes. And you know, it's human nature, I think, to not say anything to someone about an issue because you don't want to create conflict, but you wait until you're so mad that it comes out all wrong. And there's really something to be said for appropriate assertiveness. We have to address some things. And some people just put it off, put it off, put it off, and then they get so fed up that they blow up. And that's not healthy either. So, you know, again, I think it's a good time to have a PCDM on a case to help you decipher what is appropriate, what isn't, or consult your attorney. But, you know, we either act too quickly or too slowly, or, you know, we don't know when to act and what to do. Because like I said earlier, nobody anticipates going through divorce. So nobody reads up on how to have a good divorce.
No, that's a fact. And it would take an unlimited amount of volumes because each person's experience in divorce is different.
It is. That is so true. I mean, just all kinds of, when I was talking earlier about the variables, I was thinking of all kinds of things, like not only the ages of your children, the temperament of your children, their relationship with each of you, but things like how close proximity you each live from each other or to places like the school and things like that, activities the kids are in. I mean, we could go on and on and on. There are a lot of variables. And so I think it really does behoove people. This isn't a cookie cutter situation. It behooves you to get some individualized care and attention in regard to your situation and find out how to best handle it.
Yeah, I think that's true because I mean, I have seen people uh, very, very sad by their divorce. I have seen people actually experience relief at
Yes.
their divorce, and so each person's experience in the divorce process is a different, unique experience based on their unique circumstances, and so we
Mhm.
have to keep that in mind as well.
Well, truly we do. And to that point, same with kids. Like I've got kids who they come in and they are so happy because the parents aren't together anymore because it's peaceful in the household. They aren't fighting anymore. I can see mom when she's calm and it's peaceful. I can see dad when he's calm and it's peaceful. But then I have a little girl who's 8 and she cannot get over the fact that they will never all be together again. She goes, but we won't all be at Christmas, will we? We won't all be at my birthday party, will we? And she figured it out. We were talking about going camping and she started crying. And I said, honey, what are you crying about? We'll never all go camping together again. This is part of the grief process, but it hurts and it's hard. And different kids and different adults have different experiences and feel differently, handle it differently. So we can't emphasize enough. That's our takeaway today, George. You just identified it, that it's a very individualized thing.
Yeah, and I guess to console that child would be to point out you'll still have each other, just not the same way. I'm not sure how to handle that exactly. That's more your
That's
bailiwick.
it. Yes, but that's it. You nailed it. I tell them, but you're still going to see mom and you're still going to see dad. No, you're not going to see them all together, but you're still going to see mom with your siblings. You're still going to see dad with your siblings. And they accept that. And then I tell them things like, you're going to have 2 Christmases, you're going to have 2 birthday parties. How great is that? And they will
Sure.
often quickly grab onto that idea. Oh, yeah, that's great. And I get criticized sometimes for that. And people say, you don't really say that to kids, do you? Yes, I do. I absolutely do.
Sure.
Because anything we can say to make this positive or not so awful for them, I'm for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't get involved in that end of things, but certainly that would seem to be appropriate, and uh, the child would be encouraged by that. It's like telling the child who's about to have a tonsillectomy that they can have all the ice cream they want.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. But any way we can take care of these kids during this process, we have to do it. And if the parents aren't up to it, I mean, they just can't focus on the kids right now, find somebody who can work with your kids and support your kids. And it might not be a professional or it might be a professional, but kids need someone to talk to too. And they're often afraid of hurting one parent's feelings. And so they don't always say what they really feel. And that's a shame too. They've got to find a place to be able to say how they really feel.
Well, and people need to keep in mind that as lawyers, we are primarily combatants. We're not trained to be healers.
Yeah.
I think there's more emphasis, perhaps, in the legal profession on more, could I say, holistic types of approaches to divorce than there has been in the past. But still, our primary role as an advocate in the adversarial system is as a combatant.
Yes. Yes. It truly is. And, you know, we've got to try to pull people away from that mindset and um, advocate for things like a collaborative approach, you know.
Right, right.
Um, but a lot of parents don't realize that's a possibility. Oh, we can work together and get this figured out and have our attorneys cooperate with each other. And, you know, often you got to convince the attorney too, because it's your role to zealously advocate for your client.
Yes, absolutely. And that's clear. We make that clear. I think most attorneys do a pretty good job of making that clear. And they will say, do you want to try and resolve this on the mental health track or the litigation track? Because they're two very different experiences.
Yes, yes, they are. And bless you for recognizing that. And because a lot of attorneys can't really acknowledge that. I mean, they're in for the fight because that's their job, but sometimes the fight isn't best.
No, no, absolutely.
No. So look into the resources that are out there before you decide to litigate. You
No
still
question.
need your attorney, but you don't need to litigate. All right. Thank you, George, for being here yet again. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, Dr. Marlene. Always good to be with you.
Thank you. All right. We will see you next week. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.